Well, I'll go ahead and start just because of the time, and thank you. Thanks for working on that. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Vallabha Girivardha Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Janavallabha Girivardha Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Danandana Braja Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Nandana Braja Janara Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Viṣṇupād Paramahamsa Parivrajākacārya Astotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakunda Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Nugovardhan Dham Ki Jai Gangamayi Ki Jai Yamunamayi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Prihat Mridanga Ki Jai Shri hari-nāma Sankirtan Ki Jai Krishna Lounge Program Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nastapraishu abadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So, we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, Texts 28 and 29, the history of the life of Ajamila. And just give me 1 second here. Got everything? Just chant the first verse of the two. Okay, great. All right, and then after that I can just read the second one through. Okay, so let's see, get all this in the line of sight here. If I could lower this a little bit. Sorry. Always technical things with sound systems, right? Okay. Saha.
Read it from the transliteration.
Right, yeah.
Not from the sounds.
Oh.
Yeah, just so we get the sound, that's all you get.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Sa, Pasha, Hastams, Trin, Drishtva, Purushan, Ati, Darunan, Vakra, Tundan, Urdva, Romna, Atmanam, Netum, Agatan, Sapasha Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushan Ati Darunan, Vakratundan Urva Romna, Atmanam Netum Agatan, Sapasha Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushan Ati Darunan, Vakratundan Urva Romna, Atmanam Netum Agatan, Sapasha Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushan Ati Darunan, Vakratundan Urva Romna, Atmanam Netum Agatan, Sapasha Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushan Ati Darunan, Vakratundan Urva Romna, Atmanam Netum Agatan, Sapasha Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushan Ati Darunan, Vakratundan Urva Romna, Atmanam Netum Agatan, Sapasha Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushan Ati Darunan, Vakratundan Urva Romna, Atmanam Netum Agatan,
Sapasha
Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushan Ati Darunan, Vakratundan Urva Romna, Atmanam Netum Agatan, Sapasha Hastam Strindrishtva, Purushanati Darunam Vakritundan Udvaromna Atmanam Netamagatam. Mataji's? Sapasha hastam strindrishtva Purushanati Darunam Vakritundan Udvaromna Atmanam Netamagatam. Okay, I'm going to chant the second verse once through, and then we'll do the word meanings. Dore kridana kasaktam putram Narayana vayam plavitena swarenocher aju hava kulendriyaha. Saha, that person, Ajamila, Pasha hastan, having ropes in their hands. Trin, 3, Drishtva, seeing. Purushan, persons. Atidarunan, very fearful in their features. Vakratundan, with twisted faces. Urdvaromna, with hair standing on the body. Atmanam, the self. Netum, to take away. Agatan, arrived. Dure, a short distance away. Kridanaka asaktam, engaged in his play. Putram, his child. Narayana avayam, name Narayan. Plavitena, with tearful eyes. Swarena, with his voice. Uchai, very loudly. Ajuhava, called. Akula Indriya, being full of anxiety. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Ajamila then saw 3 awkward persons with deformed bodily features, fierce, twisted faces, and hair standing erect on their bodies. With ropes in their hands, they had come to take him away to the abode of Yamarāja. When he saw them, he was extremely bewildered, and because of attachment to his child, who was playing a short distance away, Ajamila began to call him loudly by his name. Thus, with tears in his eyes, he somehow or other chanted the holy name of Narayana. Purport. A person who performs sinful activities performs them with his body, mind, and words. Therefore, 3 order carriers from Yamarāja came to take Ajamila to Yamarāja's abode. Fortunately, even though he was referring to his son, Ajamila chanted the 4 syllables of the hari-nāma Narayana. Narayana. And therefore, the order carriers of Narayana, the Viṣṇudūtas, also immediately arrived there. Because Ajamila was extremely afraid of the ropes of Yamarāja, he chanted the Lord's name with tearful eyes. Actually, however, he never meant to chant the holy name of Narayana. He meant to call his son. Om Agyanatimirandasya Ganangaran Shalakaya Chakshurun Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhascha Kripasinibhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, the scene is unfolding. It's very amazing. Pastime, so instructive for all of us. And I have to say, probably most of what I say you've heard before. Yesterday when Maharaj gave class, when they started chanting the Sanskrit, I realized I've heard this before. And when I was 18, I was able to attend just about 7 times in person when Prabhupada spoke, and the first verse he did was yesterday's verse, and the second verse he did was today's. So these are some of the things that really stuck out in my mind. So I've quoted from this class that Prabhupada gave on this verse a bunch of times, I think even last week when I gave class, because those things really stuck in my brain, you know, a few lessons. I mean, there was so much more there. I have a cow-dung brain. But anyway, so I apologize if you're rehearing things, but these are things that really stuck in my brain. So at least initially I'm going to try to paraphrase some of what Srila Prabhupada said in the class he gave on this verse. I actually listened to it again. I found it on ISKCON Desire Tree. And interestingly enough, because Maharaj is here from Hawaii, the two times that there seems to be tapes of that class, one time was Philadelphia where I was present, and the other time was Hawaii in Honolulu. And it was very interesting because at that... 76? Yeah, because at that time in Philadelphia was 75. And it wasn't published yet. You know, we all know the story. In 75, Prabhupada made that marathon. The publishing was way behind, and so that was the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the 5th canto. So the 6th canto was still completely manuscript. But because it's so important to all of us, Prabhupada was lecturing long before the 6th canto was published at so many places, right? And so anyway, this was a manuscript. So the first thing that happened at that class was the translation was a bit different than what we read today because it was a manuscript. So the devotee was reading through, and then, you know, he got to the punchline, and, you know, with tears in his eyes, Ajamila called, "Narayan, Narayan, Narayan!" And immediately Srila Prabhupada said, "Is that 3 times?" and the devotee said, the manuscript said 3 times. Prabhupada said, "It is not 3 times, it is once. Did I say 3 times? Correct it." Like that. And then Prabhupada said, no reason for calling 3 times. Once is sufficient, right? So this was very amazing. And then Prabhupada said, "Uchai al-juhava," very loudly, "Narayan," right? So immediately I was stunned. I mean, I wasn't even a full-time devotee. You know, I was 18 years old, but like what I took away was like how careful Srila Prabhupada is in the composition of his books. As soon as he detected a mistake, and this was just a manuscript, but he immediately, you know, pointed it out, you know, and he told them on the spot. He said, he also said, "Is this edited yet?" And they said, "No, Prabhupada." And Prabhupada said, "Change that," you know. So that was a very, you know, for me that was very enlivening, very enlightening, and, you know, just nice to see. And then of course, this big point, Prabhupada says, it is not 3 times, once is sufficient, right? One utterance of the holy name is all it takes, and in this, you know, seminal example was all it took, right? And the mood, right? Uchai, ajuhava, very loudly, right? What is that? Akulendriya, with tears in the eyes, right? Make sure I get the Sanskrit right. Sorry, that was being full of anxiety, and plavitena, with tearful eyes, right? So we know Ajamila was not even accustomed to chanting anymore, right? But he had fallen away so much so that he was engaged in all kinds of sinful activities. But this very amazing example is given, and Srila Prabhupada went on to explain that although Ajamila, right, fell away and became so involved in sinful activities, he was cheating, he was robbing, he was stealing, he was doing all this nonsense, right? But Krishna is very, very grateful, and even if a little devotional service is rendered by a devotee, Krishna never forgets that, right? Prabhupada pointed out that although Ajamila had completely forgotten Krishna, completely, more or less, right? But Krishna never forgot Ajamila. So then Prabhupada explained it. I'll just read the quote because it's very sweet. Prabhupada quoted Sarvasya Chaham Hridisani Vishto, right? From me comes remembrance, I'm situated in everyone's heart. From me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Right? And Srila Prabhupada explained that if we want to forget Krishna, then Krishna will, he'll give us that forgetfulness. He won't be, you know, guiding us in that way. But for a devotee, right? Prabhupada said, he paraphrased Krishna, he said, "This rascal, he was my devotee. Now he has fallen. All right. He's attached to his children. So he gave the conscience, keep your son's name Narayan, right? That, like, so Prabhupada explained like that. The Lord is thinking like that. Krishna reciprocates. He gives forgetfulness to those that want to forget him, right? Prabhupada says in one place that if we want to forget Krishna, Krishna will give us so much forgetfulness and he'll give us so much knowledge, right? These people are, like coming up with all these arguments to support atheism. And where is that coming from? Very brilliant people. Where is that knowledge coming from? It's coming from Krishna. They have this desire to forget Krishna. Okay, you want it? Here, right? But if one wants to remember Krishna, or if one even at some time wanted to remember Krishna, Prabhupada said, but for a devotee, even one who is foolishly in bad association, like Ajamila, who forgets Krishna, Krishna doesn't forget him. Krishna gives him a chance, right? And then Prabhupada said, Krishna will always do this for a devotee, unless, of course, one is too much of an offender to Guru and Vaishnavas. Prabhupada said, then he is in a very difficult position, right? So we are trying to be devotees, and we have to, as Lord Chaitanya pointed out, right, the hari-nāma, the mad elephant offense is that we make offenses to Guru and Vaishnavas. Because Prabhupada's pointing out that even someone has fallen as Ajamila, right? Even someone has fallen as Ajamila. Krishna was right there. Prabhupada said Krishna was waiting, Krishna was watching, right? And then when the right time came, I mean, this is what, 65 years later? No, we read the other day, Ajamila was 88. He had just had this baby, right? Baby must have been born when he was 87 and a half or whatever, because he was 88 and the baby was still a baby, right? So, but Prabhupada said Krishna was watching, and at that time he knew that this old man is going to be so attached to this baby, and from within he said, you name this boy Narayan, right? Krishna was watching. He was waiting for the opportunity to benefit his devotee because of the devotional service he had rendered. And I think this is a really important lesson for all of us too, because Krishna, of course, he's God, and he sees everything past, present, and future. He knows everyone's heart, all those things. But when you look at the very merciful way, right, the gratitude, the mercy, the love that he has for his devotees, right? So, and we're down here on the ground, and we're, dealing with things, in our lives and the way they come. But in dealing with devotees in particular, we also have to be aware of this, because, there's that nice phrase the Christians have, there but for the grace of God go I, right? It's like every one of us, well, let's see, any Gurukulis here, but most of us, in any event, we've engaged in all these sinful activities, you know what I mean? And somehow or other, the Vaishnavas, they reached out to us. They reached us with a book. We heard the hari-nāma. Someone gave us a pakora, fried in ghee, offered to Krishna, right? Somehow or other, right? We were given this opportunity to come to Krishna consciousness. And, as we become engaged in Krishna consciousness and we become, a nice devotee, that's really what needs to happen. That is what happens, and that's the grace also. But we always have to remember, that we're also coming, from this background. And sometimes it happens, and this is another big point that Prabhupada, gets into, is that Ajamila's sinful activities and the fall down that propelled him into those sinful activities was actually, it was not planned, right? It was not purposeful. It was actually circumstantial. Like we know the story. He was out actually doing seva, and he became attracted. He started looking at this scene, and he became attracted to this prostitute, and it just couldn't. It went into his heart. He contemplated it. He meditated on it. It captured his consciousness. And he got into it, and he stayed into it, and his whole life became destroyed. All the good things in his life were destroyed. They were all replaced with bad things, right? Right? But how did Krishna deal with such a fallen soul, right? I mean, and actually, Maharaj, you had posted this recently. I had always heard the quote where Srila Prabhupada said it takes gallons of blood to make a devotee, and we have to be so careful to retain them. And you posted, I believe, on the Honolulu feed, right? It was a story about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And I guess that's where Srila Prabhupada had gotten that theme from his spiritual master, because it was an amazing pastime where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he came to a city in India where the Gaudiya Math was just about to open a temple, right? And like the invitations were passed out, the dignitaries were coming, the chief guests had been appointed, the deities were behind the curtain ready to be installed. It's a couple days before the grand opening. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta came and he asked for so-and-so Das, who had done a lot to bring that yatra to that point. And the brahmacharis, very expertly pointed out that he had fallen into Maya. He had something happen with him and some woman. And, we really chastised the rascal, And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's like, well, where is he? And they said, we don't know, he went away. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta just said, I will not open this temple until you go to him, find him, apologize, and bring him back. And they're like, it's like, it's like the last minute. And he was dead serious, So these guys snapped out of it. And they ran and they found that devotee. And they told him that, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta has come. He's inquiring for you. We're so sorry that we dealt with you so harshly. And the devotee was just like, oh, I felt so bad. I just was afraid to come because, And he immediately just dropped everything and just ran back to the temple and fell at Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's feet, apologizing. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta immediately accepted him, and he was fully reabsorbed in service. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had told them that we spend gallons of blood to make a devotee, and if we treat them in a way that they go away or like that, it's the greatest loss, right? So, when we see how the spiritual master deals with the devotees, how Krishna deals with the devotees, and not that, we have our standards and they have to be upheld, but within all of that, we always have to remember this mood of appreciation, and this mood of mercy. And frankly, the understanding that there, but for the grace of God go I, because any one of us, right? Srila Prabhupada also in this class that he gave, he explained that in the modern world, right? This whole thing with the Ajamila, that was like a one-off in those days. But like in this modern world, this is what we're surrounded with day in and day out. And we grow up performing, we're addicted to all kinds of sinful acts. And Prabhupada quoted that famous story with Lord Zetland, right? When his godbrothers had gone to England. And he had actually been a very high post in India, right? And he had come back to England, and they knew him. He was also Scottish, Prabhupada liked that, Scottish Churches College. And so, they approached him. He approached them, and he said, Swamiji, because he was very interested. He had lived in India. He was interested in the Vedic philosophy. He was a philosopher himself. Can you make me a Brahmin? Right? This was the big question. And they said yes, because they were trained up by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. This is the line of Lord Chaitanya. This is not the Brahmin by birth, right, Smarta Brahmin thing. This is the, yes, you can become a Brahmin. Simply you have to chant these holy names of Krishna and follow these: no eating of meat, fish, or eggs, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex. And when Lord Zetland heard this is the famous quote, right? Impossible, right? Right? Because for those of us steeped in Western culture, it's impossible, right? But it's not impossible. It is possible, but it's only possible by the mercy of the Lord and the spiritual master and the Vaishnavas, right? But that highlights the great difficulty that we all face in maintaining ourselves for our lifetime in Krishna consciousness. Because we come to Krishna consciousness, but we have these samskaras. Samskara means deep impressions in the heart, right? So we have these samskaras because of the life that we have lived. And of course, there's lifetimes and lifetimes. We've been at this for a while. We've been trying to squeeze nectar out of these bodies and these senses in this material world for a long time, right? And even in this life, many of us, especially myself included, have engaged in so many sinful activities. And, these samskaras are there. So, therefore, Lord Krishna's mercy is such that in the Bhagavad Gita, he declares, apichet Apichet Sudarachara, was that Bhajate Mamananyabhak, Sadareva Samantavya Samyag Vyavasito. He saw that even if one commits the most abominable activities, if one is engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. So Lord Krishna, he makes this proclamation. Excuse me one sec. And as Maharaj quoted yesterday, and I think Dravida also highlighted that beautiful verse. Wow, I looked it up. Swapadamulam Bhajata Priyasya, right? The 11th canto, 5th chapter. It begins with that. But that takes Lord Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita and it just elaborates it even a little more. It's actually explained there that for one who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, a devotee, and has given up all other engagements, they become priyasya, they become very, very dear to the Lord. So dear that even if they accidentally commit some sinful act, the Lord himself immediately takes away that sinful reaction because they're engaged in his devotional service, right? And then Srila Prabhupada, he quotes those verses, and then of course the rest of the class, he is also explaining, very, very carefully that this mercy of the Lord, it specifically refers to circumstantial fall downs, to accidental sinful activities. This point, Prabhupada explains very, very clearly that we are engaging in devotional service, but because of our past habit, it could happen, right? It could happen that one circumstantially falls down, right? Someone quoted the other day, there's an example Prabhupada gave that somebody is a devotee and they're out doing some service and they run into an old friend, right? And then the old friend offers them a cigarette. And because of their past habit, they take the cigarette and start smoking, and then all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, what am I doing, right? So this is a very benign example of a circumstantial fall down, of a sinful activity. But, this is the point, that there's a difference between accidental fall down and the seventh offense, right? To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy names, because we can read something like this, we can understand something like this and think, wow, great, And although for those of us that are, here fully engaged, trying to dedicate our lives practicing sadhana bhakti, it may seem far-fetched that, that I would make a whole program of performing sinful activities based on the strength of devotion to God. But it's not so far-fetched. I mean, we don't need to look too far, right? There's a gigantic religion, right, where people go, is it Saturdays? To confession, right? And you go in and you confess your sins, and you get absolved. One of George Harrison's songs, he grew up Catholic and then he became a devotee, but he had a little edge sometimes towards some of the Catholic rituals, and I noticed I was quite a fan of George Harrison, my Pratvadarshik guru. And in one song he says, goes to the priest and, 3 Hail Marys and get back out there and do whatever you want to do, so... or we're reading earlier in the chapter about atonement, prayaschitta, right? Also in our Vedic religion, in the Karmakanda sections, they have all these ideas that, okay, you perform some sin, so you do some prayaschitta, you try to become free from the suffering that we've created for ourselves, right? And we've learned that that's, not the proper system. It doesn't change the heart from wanting to engage in those activities again. But yeah, the point is that not only is that tendency there to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name, or on the strength of engaging in some sort of devotion to God, but people make entire religious paths out of it, right? I mean, huge, they've taken the concept of confession, and in some of the more extreme Protestant groups, I used to listen to this guy on the radio. He was a Christian preacher. He had a worldwide show, and he was, very educated man. He had a PhD from Stanford, which don't come cheap, And I like to listen to him because sometimes I was driving around doing my sales work, and you get stuck in the car a while. At least it was something religious, right? And he was quite a historian, so he would a lot of biblical history and a lot of interesting tie-ins, right? But when he would get going on his it's all about faith, thing. You know what I mean? Not by works alone. Like that vein. There's that famous letters between James, Jesus' brother, and Paul, right? Paul, the founder of Paulianity, which, a big branch of Christianity. And these famous quotes, because James had written, and said that because Paul was preaching this, that you just have faith and it doesn't matter what you do, which has kind of become the modern theme, and James, and Paul had said, it's not, not by works alone. In other words, you don't need to perform austerities and do all these pious things to please God. You just have to have faith. And then James wrote back, but don't you know, brother, that faith without works is dead? So these are all from correspondence. But this was early Christianity where they were kind of sorting it out, And unfortunately, Paul prevailed. So I was listening to this guy with this worldwide radio show, and when he really got on it, he took it to the point that, if you even try to follow, religious principles, if you even are trying, consciously to, avoid sinful activities, you're bogus, because you're not recognizing the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross for you, right? You are faithless. Jesus died on the cross for you so that you could do X, Y, and Z, and so, maybe you shouldn't want to do X, Y, and Z, but don't try to live a pious life, because that is the symptom that you don't have faith. So, talk about, get your cake and eat it too,
You see why you had such a huge following.
Yeah, got a big following, but so these things are going on, and so this understanding of and adherence to, the meaning behind this seventh offense is very, very important, because whole religions have been diverted by, this concept, right? That I can have my cake and eat it too, So anyway, Srila Prabhupada, he explained very, very, carefully these points that, we are meant to serve the Lord. The Lord is very, very kind. He's very, very merciful. He's very grateful. He appreciates even the slightest devotional service that we render. And what to speak of if we continually try to engage in devotional service and continually try to protect ourselves from performing sinful activities, right? But even if one circumstantially falls down, right? Even if we forget Krishna, Krishna will never forget us. This is one of the great lessons from this pastime. And, who could have made a better arrangement to bring Ajamila back onto the devotional path, right? Exactly the right time, exactly the right, from within his heart, Krishna said, you name this boy Narayan, right? Just knowing the nature of this old man, and knowing the attachment that this old man was going to have to that baby, and knowing that the Yamarājas were going to be coming, right? And knowing that that moment was going to happen. And in the class after this one, I'll go ahead and share it, because, Prabhupada gave this beautiful example, because he was in America, and Prabhupada's traveling around the West and seeing how America worked, right? So at this same moment, when the Yamarājas are coming, he sees them, they're nearby, and listen to that description of the Yamarājas. Oh my God, twisted faces, hair standing on end. I mean, these are scary guys, with ropes. I mean, sometimes you wonder, it's an amazing position. What kind of, I don't know if karma is the word or destiny it is to become a Yamarāja, I mean, you think about these guys. They're the direct servants of Yamarāja, right? I mean, Yamarāja, extremely, great devotee. He's one of the 12 Mahajans. They're his direct servants for this particular service, right? It's not like they're just a bunch of Hell's Angels, you know what I mean? But they look like a bunch of Hell's Angels, you know what I mean? And they're really scary dudes, So this whole thing happened, and Ajamila screams, Narayan, with tears in his eyes and very loudly in great anxiety. And then Prabhupada explained, he said, just like in your country, what is that? The police, they are in their, what is that? Cruisers. Prabhupada said they are cruising around in their cruisers, and then someone dials 911, right? So Prabhupada said it's like that. Like the Viṣṇudūtas are there, and as soon as they hear their master's name, they appeared on the scene, just like the police in their cruisers, they get the 911 call, and immediately they're there. Prabhupada said that. What is that? Some devotee said cruisers. Prabhupada said, yes, they are in their cruisers. And they hear the call, and they immediately come, so it was very sweet, So in the same way, this holy name, this is our 911, right? What is that? We heard recently, Vaisheshika Prabhu, someone asked him, what is the meaning of Hare Krishna? And it was like, Krishna, help me. I need help. I need help. So this is like the 911 call, right? So, so this is like that. So anyway, so much mercy is there, and we just have to stay on this path, and just dedicate ourselves. And even if we accidentally, circumstantially perform some sinful act or have some difficulty, this is another one of Maya's trick, that I am too fallen, right? We get knocked out of the ring. And an amazing thing is, like Srila Prabhupada, he very, very carefully taught this lesson also, that even if one is unable to continue, and I'll end with this, but it's quite amazing. This is 3 different sannyasis who had to give up their sannyas, right, because of realizing they, different reasons, but, because they couldn't go on as a celibate monk, basically. And the way Prabhupada dealt with this is so amazing. Also, when I was 18, a few months after this class, I got shanghaied by Radha Damodar. So Vishnu John Maharaj and Tamal Krishna Maharaj invited me onto their bus, and I went with them. And Vishnu John Maharaj was taking care of new people like me. And I came to know this devotee was such a nice devotee. He was so kind and so sweet and so caring. And he chanted so beautifully. When he chanted, you felt like you were being transported, like to Krishna consciousness. He would close his eyes and he'd just be so absorbed. Really nice devotee. And he was so nice to us. There were 3 new guys that got on the bus that day, and he was like our Bhakti leader, and he was so nice. So then, like less than a year later, he gave up his body, and apparently he was feeling that he may fall down, or no one knows the whole story, but he gave up his body, and that was such a deep thing for me. And then sometime later, we heard the quote, I think it was when the Lilamrita came out, but there was the quote from Hari Prabhu also, that when Prabhupada, when it was confirmed that he had given up his body, Prabhupada's comment was, what can I do if he doesn't want to go on serving? And it took me years to process that. I couldn't understand it. I was thinking, wow, that seems harsh. You know what I mean? Like Vishnu John, such a surrendered soul. He even gave up his body, rather than fall down, like in that mood of Junior Haridas. So, it was like, I was bewildered by that for years. And then finally, like, I came to understand, because I think someone mentioned recently the 8th Canto purport on Gajendra the elephant, when Prabhupada was processing Madhuvisa Maharaj, who was saying that I have to give up my sannyas, and that amazing purport where Prabhupada had written him back and said, stay as grihasta, but don't go. Same message, continue serving, right? It's not these positions. The ashrams are positions from which we engage in devotional service. And they're important, but the real business is devotional service. So Prabhupada in the Gajendra purport was saying, find the situation where you're getting the nourishment you need, and be settled and engage in progressive devotional service, right? Gajendra was in trouble because he was in the water and he was a creature of the land. The crocodile was doing great because he was in the water and he was a creature of the water. So although Gajendra was stronger, he was losing his strength because he was in the wrong element, right? So Prabhupada used that example that stay as devotee. If you have to give up your sannyas even, which no one recommends, but stay as devotee, don't leave. And then the third Maharaj, Rupanuga, he was GBC in the area I was attending the temples. Such an empowered devotee. I mean, when Prabhupada came, he was organizing everything, and it was like watching lightning or something. He was so expert, and he was getting so much done, and he had made so many devotees and done so much. And then after about a year of sannyas, he went to Prabhupada and said, I can't do this. And Prabhupada said, go back to your family, that's fine. And he was still on the GBC for another 20, 30 years, doing tons of service. And I met him in Alachua about a year ago, and he's still completely fixed in devotional service, right? So, you know, this is the point, is that we are coming from the Western world. We are coming from very sinful backgrounds. Somehow or other, by the grace of the devotees, we become devotees. And the point is, keep on serving. You know, even if something gets really messed up, even if we have a crisis of faith, even if we have to change ashrams, right? I was a brahmachari here, there was a bunch of us, and one day, the first guy who, you know, fell in the well, came down the stairs in white to Mangal Arti, you know, and it was like a hush went over the crowd, you know. You know, I was so happy to hear how nowadays Vaisheshika Prabhu actually gives a whole ceremony where they graduate to white, you know, but like in those days it was like, you know, what happened to you, you know? You know. So anyway, the point is, even if one has to change ashrams from sannyas, Srila Prabhupada said, stay and serve. That's the bottom line. Stay and serve, because it's by that devotional service that we'll become Krishna conscious, right? And so don't let Maya kick us out of the box that, oh, I screwed up, this or that. Okay, I screwed up. We got mud all over our face. Wash it off. Get back up and keep serving. That's Krishna's message. That's Prabhupada's message. And, you know, just have that faith that, sometimes they say, Ashabandha, great hope, that if I just keep going on in devotional service, by Krishna and Guru's grace, everything is going to work out, right? We just have to keep that, you know, because a lot of stuff's going to happen in the course of a life, you know, but we just keep that going. So I'm sorry, a little long. I'll stop there. Any corrections, comments, questions? Prabhu, what's your good name? I'm sorry. Balaram Shakti. Hare Krishna. Oh, thank you for your wonderful association.
Hare Krishna. I wanted to first share the quotation of this is from the pen of His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Thank you.
There's a list of like 20 items here. If you haven't read these, just search from the pen of His Divine Grace, and they're powerful.
Nice.
And the final one, actually, is, I wish that every selfless, tender-hearted person of Gaudiya Math will be prepared to shed 200 gallons of blood for the nourishment of the spiritual corpus of every individual of this world.
Wow. Thank you. There it is.
Yeah.
Not just a gallon or two, but...
Yeah, 200.
200.
It's a lot of, like, months of producing blood.
So this is the emphatic order of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Dhrita Prabhu.
Yeah, just two things, and a very nice class, thank you. This is from, where did those three names come in? You know, how did that get in the manuscript? And when you read the beginning of the purport, right? Is that the three Yamadutas came because body, mind, and words? Right. That's where I think it came in. Oh. But more importantly, the editorial, very important. You quoted this verse, Swapada Moolam Bhajatak Priyasya, Chaktanya Bhava Sahadi Paresha, Vikarma Yacho Patitam Katanchit, Dunoti Sarvam Mridisannavishta. This word Dunoti keeps coming in at the beginning, Srinvatamsa, cleansing, Krishna cleanses. So, now this verse, those who have read the first canto, hopefully many of you, it's rare that Prabhupada quotes a verse in the purport. You know what I mean? In other words, he does that more frequently later on, but in his first canto. But here he's quoting this verse. He quotes this verse in 19th chapter, the last chapter of the first canto, text 7. He quotes that verse, and it's in the context of the descendant upon us went towards the bank of the Ganges, so that Parikshit has, is giving everything up, and because he's, he committed that faux pas, if you will, of the snake around and that blew up into the whole curse. So he quotes the Sanskrit, but in the book that was published that we have for the last 50 years, there was no translation of it. It's just the purport ends with the quote. I say, well, that's pretty odd. Let me look at the original. And there's a whole bunch here which contains a statement that you won't find, that's very rare. So I'm just going to read the Prabhupada's translation and explanation of that in this purport. That's not in the books we print, although except in that little sampler we have, the first 8 chapters. You distribute those, right? Huh? I put it in there. Oh, no, actually I couldn't. No, that only goes up to the 8th chapter. No, it's in the database. So what Prabhupada says there, it's all about intentional or unintentional. Is that, your sin. So, the devotee of the Lord never commits sins willingly, but the material world is such a place that one has to commit sins even unwillingly. The finest way to save one from such accidental sins of life is to remember constantly the lotus feet of the Lord. But one who commits sins willingly on the strength of the Lord's assurances for saving does commit the maximum amount of sins, and there is no deliverance even by constantly remembering the lotus feet of the Lord. Such willful offender has no chance of being freed from the clutches of fruitive action. Just the direct opposite to that crazy preacher who is saying, you're not faithful unless you commit sins, so that the Lord can save. That's just completely crazy. This is the real thing. But this is if you try committing sins on the strength of chanting, that offense. That's what he's talking about. I'll be all right. Just do exactly what the priest was saying. So there is no deliverance even if you remember the Lord.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
We have another one here, and we'll be with you just in a moment, Vijay Krishna.
Yes, I can wait. No
Thank
problem.
you.
Just because you mentioned about becoming a Yamadutta, so I read this recently. It says in the Garuda Purana 2:1834 that those who have passed several years in the dreadful hell and have no descendants to offer them gifts, or I guess it means like pinda, in their favor, become messengers of Yama.
Wow.
And I've also heard, and maybe one of the senior devotees can confirm this, I've also heard that Vaishnava Paratis become Yamaduttas. I don't remember exactly where I heard that. I think it was in a class, but I also did hear that. I remember hearing that.
I wonder if that's like a work release program,
Sure. 100 million years.
Okay, anything else locally? I'm sorry, you didn't finish.
No, it's okay. I had a separate question you made a really nice point of, I could listen to this topic all day. I mean, it's such a deep and, difficult to grasp completely, that generally the atonement, the prayascha, it doesn't cleanse the heart of the proclivities, and that's the issue. And grappling with this in my own self, and also in reference to a class by Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj on the 3 types of bhakti, that there's this aropa siddha bhakti, which is basically just bhakti by superimposition, saying in Jesus' name, amen, it's like whatever you do, but you're just adding. And if it's not kaitava, like if you actually have the intention to cleanse the heart, even if you are doing sinful activity, if you just say, look, Krishna, I can't help myself here, I don't want to do this, but just see, I'm so bound, that actually that contrition will purify those things. It just, take longer, but it's there. I wanted to ask you about, because you were mentioning the, let's see, yes, so the Ajamila was basically saved by grace. We're talking about Paul and James, like works alone or not. Right. So it's like you could say, oh, well, Ajamila was saved by grace, but of course our counters, but he still had to do the work. Mm-hmm. And so, like what's the difference? Maybe if you could talk a little on this, because devotees could easily think, I've chanted 16 rounds for a good amount of time. I think I should be fine. That I probably they'll let me in. But it's like God's mercy is not something static. It's not a one and done affair. So, what is the nature of its dynamism in like our life being an opportunity to build our relationship? Get deeper into the heart of God, sort of thing. Like, why do we do that?
Yeah, it was interesting because in this same class, and I'll try to give a small answer. Maybe someone more learned can go more deep. But in the same class, excuse me, Srila Prabhupada was explaining that Krishna doesn't need any service, and that the whole process of devotional service is for us. It's just an opportunity for us, and Krishna very mercifully extends this opportunity for us. And more specifically, with the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, this whole gift of the holy names of Krishna, the Maha Mantra, right, which is such a completely purifying activity, right? And so Prabhupada said, no matter what, go on chanting, never stop chanting, just take shelter of these names. He actually said it in this same class. Let me just try to read it, because I even wrote it down, if I can find it real quick, because he said it very, very feelingly. So like this, I won't be able to find it quick enough, but this extension of the holy name, to us, it's like Srila Prabhupada had so much faith, that if we continually chant the holy names of the Lord, that we'll become purified, right? So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but like along the same line, in the same class, actually, this class that I was quoting from was, I think the devotees would title them, but it was called "Krishna is Very Tricky," right? So, and Prabhupada, got to that point that Ajamila wasn't trying to trick Krishna. He wasn't trying to, let me chant the holy name because these scary guys are here. He was just calling his son. But Krishna had tricked him to name his son Narayan. So in the days and months leading up to this whole event, he was constantly chanting the holy name. Narayan, come sit. Narayan, take your food. Narayan, come play with me. Narayan this, Narayan that. So constantly, Krishna knew that. So like this purification was going on, and then at that ultimate moment, right? There's one quote, I forget the Bengali, but Prabhupada says, there's a quote that says, you may be a big devotee, that's all right, but whatever you do will be tested at the time of death. Whatever process of yoga, whatever process of jnana, whatever spiritual thing you're doing, right? This is when the big test comes, right? And Krishna actually prepared Ajamila for that, you know what I mean? Because of his gratitude that this person had rendered some service. And then Prabhupada said, so Krishna is very tricky, right? He tricked this devotee in a nice way, and then Prabhupada, went into the Damodar Lila. Krishna is very tricky, right? He performed all this mischief, and Mother Yasoda is trying to tie him up. But every time she brought all the rope in her stock, and it was 2 inches too short. So Krishna is very tricky. But then finally he saw that she's my pure devotee, she's trying so hard, she's sweating, okay. He let himself be tied up, and then he told the story about when Krishna told Yudhisthira that you tell Dronacharya that Ashvatthama is dead, right? And that was a trick, because Bhima had to run out and kill some elephant named Ashvatthama, because Yudhisthira was worried about, I've never broken my word, so okay, so Bhima got it. He killed some elephant named Ashvatthama so Yudhisthira could, And actually, it's really interesting because, when Prabhupada first brought that example up, he was saying that because of his sin, Ajamila had to see the Yamarājas, right? And so he brought it up in that context that Yudhishthira had to see hell, right? And then some acharyas say it was because he told a lie because he was, he was so truthful. But some acharyas say it was because he hesitated to carry out Krishna's order, right? So anyway, Krishna is very tricky. Prabhupada was making that point, and he said, so don't try to trick Krishna. This is the whole point. Like you pointed out in that thing too, that even if one is engaged in some sinful activity, if their intention is Krishna, please help me to overcome this, right? So that's the consciousness. At whatever stage we're at, we have to have that intention, right? Like in the 12th chapter, Krishna says, be a pure devotee. If you can't do that, be a sadhaka. If you can't do that, be a good guy, right? Give some charity. But the point is, recognize where we're at, and from whatever point that is, continually try to go forward, right? Try to go forward sincerely. And Krishna is right there to help us, and Guru is right there to help us, and the devotees are right there to help us. So I think that, as you pointed out, the intention is so, so important in all this, because if the intention is right, we're going to get so much help, from within, from without. Balaram Prabhu.
Yeah, just in addition to what you're saying,
please.
not taken away, but in addition.
Please.
Yeah, you mentioned in your question about, you said, okay, well, I've chanted 16 rounds for so many years, they just let me in, right? So, I'm sure, some have thought like that, or some think like that, or whatever, but it's wrong in the sense that, like Srila Prabhupada explains the defects of the conditioned soul. One of the defects is the cheating mentality, which the cheating mentality goes so deep. It goes really deep, actually. It means the desire to cheat others and also cheat oneself, or just to be cheated. It goes really deep. So, this idea that, okay, well, I'll just do a particular amount of devotional service, or I'll just serve Krishna to a particular point, and I'll just stop, and then later I'll get the mercy of Krishna. But it's wrong, because why would we want to stop? To chant 16 rounds, or to serve Krishna, why would we want to stop? That means that we actually don't have much taste for it, and much taste for it means we actually don't have much love for Krishna. Why would we want to stop loving Krishna? So that's what it's practically meaning. So why wouldn't we want to chant? It's like, I'll just chant later. It's like, well, why are they gonna let you in, if you want to use that terminology? Why are they gonna let you in, or why are we gonna attain the special mercy if practically we really just don't want it? And then you could say, well, all right, so let's just give up Krishna consciousness altogether. Well, no, that's not the point. It means with intelligence to understand the importance of Krishna consciousness, and even if we don't have much taste, therefore the process of sadhana bhakti means, right, we're understanding the importance of it and engaging in it, even if we don't have taste, means out of duty. We do it out of duty. Not that, I don't have any love for Krishna, okay, let me just give it up. Well, it's like we understand the importance of it, and then out of duty we do it. And that's the important thing to be convinced of. Okay, I need to do this by duty. And then by duty we keep on going, and eventually that taste comes. And there's no question, okay, I'm just going to give it up, and later I'll get some special mercy. It's, you continue more and more and more and more and more, and that, comes out. So, yeah. But, of course, this is one thought. There's so many thoughts that could, get in our way. And therefore, there's classes all the time, and, associating devotees and reading and all this. So just in addition to what you're saying, because I appreciate your points. And such questions are actually like, you could give a seminar just based on his question, it's just another point I'm making, that's all.
Yeah, I was getting to from what you were saying that it's kind of like most processes, you have a means and you have an end, but in Krishna consciousness, the means and the end are it just goes on and on and on. Like we don't chant. Okay, now I've chanted 6 billion rounds. I'm going through them pearly gates and taking vacation. It's like we chant the chant, right?
A big Christian guy in America, I don't know his name, but anyways, Devaramrita Swami was giving class one time and he said that his mother was a follower of this person. And this person was asked one time, what will you do when you go to the kingdom of God? What will you do? And the man said, I mean, a huge personality in this particular religion, he said, when I go to heaven, I will serve God for 100 years, and after that, I'll enjoy.
Sounds like the Mormons.
He wasn't Mormon, but it was another guy, Christian. But it's a very,
Interesting.
strange. You are. There's like a demarcation between serving God and enjoying.
Right.
That's where the happiness should be coming from.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. So it's really late, and I apologize. Vijay Krishna Prabhu, I don't want to offend you, but we're at 9 o'clock.
No, but Prabhu, Maitreya Prabhu is here with a comment and a question.
Okay, well, if anybody wants to leave, you feel free. Go ahead, Maitreya Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for the point that Bhakti is both the means and the end. Yamarāja in his wonderful class yesterday mentioned the leitmotif, that's Leitmotif, which means a recurring theme. It's a word usually used by scholars and English teachers, but we can all adopt it into our vocabulary because it's the theme of Bhakti being the end of the means. And you started the class today with that wonderful quote from the first canto, second chapter, Nasta Preshu Abadreshu. And it starts by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and it ends in Bhakti is established as an irrevocable fact. Hello. So we want to get Bhakti, attend Bhagavatam class, serve the Bhagavata as the devotees. So that's definitely a good way to start. And that series of verses is a nice one to memorize if anyone is looking to begin their memorization career. Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 18, and the next 4 verses are just sublime verses on once you get Bhakti, first get Bhakti, then what happens when you get Bhakti? It's like a sales pamphlet on why Bhakti is so awesome. And then in the 5th chapter, Narada Muni says, even if you fall down, what's the loss? And Prabhupada finishes that purport with the example of Ajamila. He says Ajamila in his early life was a devotee, but in his youth he fell down. Still he was saved by the Lord at the end. So my question is, Bhakti, in one sense, as Prabhupada said, devotional service, spiritual life is like a razor's edge. But if you look at the tightrope walkers, which is also they're not thinking about falling. They're not, otherwise they would. They're thinking about getting to the other side. In our case, we're thinking about attaining Bhakti. And so that's what we want to focus on. We're definitely not focused on falling. If someone's focused on falling, that becomes an offense, the 7th offense. So my question is, and one comment about the Christians, which I just couldn't miss. The Christians forget that in Matthew, Jesus said, be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. So how do you do that? So that's really the salient point I bring up with Christians, is that you're not supposed to rely on Jesus to take up all the sins all the time. He did it once, now you become perfect. And how do you do it? You pray like anything. Psalms, it says, pray with each breath. Jesus said the new commandment is to love your Father, love God with all your heart, love your brother as yourself. So if you love God, it means he gave commandments, follow them. It's not, you don't give the excuse of not following them and then at the same time try to say you love somebody. That's just nonsense. So anyway, my question is, how can we focus on the goal and not be, we recite the 10 offenses, so we are aware of the pitfalls. How can we make our meditation positive so that we're attaining the goal without meditating too much on the downside? Because what Dravida quoted is sort of terrifying at the same time. If we fall into the wrong mentality, we're doomed. So how can we avoid that in a positive way?
Well, just to end on that, I would say chant with feeling and engage in devotional service with feeling. Just like Ajamila here, he chanted with a lot of feeling, and there was one Sunday feast in Boston. I heard a lecture on tape, and somebody asked Srila Prabhupada, what do you kind of think when you're chanting this Hare Krishna? And Prabhupada held up his bead bag and said, my friend, So I think if we engage in devotional service with as much feeling, as we can, and even in the Nectar of Instruction, right, there's that one place where Prabhupada says, sometimes even in the beginning, we're not feeling it, but we try to engage, as sincerely and seriously as we can, and gradually the feeling will come, so, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but, like in other words, really try as feelingly as possible to just, have that faith and just engage in devotional service with everything we have, and just figure, like sometimes devotees would say, just try to give this one life to Krishna. I mean, if we accept that we're eternal and we've been banging around this material world through countless bodies in the wheel of samsara, what the heck? Here we are with the human body, we met the devotees, there's a bona fide spiritual master, Prabhupada's our primary Shiksha guru with a whole library full of Krishna consciousness. Just give this one life to Krishna with feeling. That's my humble answer.
My friend, thank you.
Thank you, Maitreya Prabhu. So we really better end because of the time. Thank you so much, everyone. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.